got all the talking points, all the highs and lows, all of the lies, all of the cover-ups coming up on this special edition of the Roundtable. And filling out the Roundtable, Julie Gunlock, the director of the Independent Women's Network at Independent Women's Forum, Vice President of Americans for Prosperity, Akash Chougule, and investigative journalist at the Washington Examiner, Gabe Kaminsky. We are brought to you by Americans for Prosperity. My name's Larry O'Connor. It's time for the Roundtable. And we begin this week, as we always do, with a clip from This Week on the Hill, Salem News Channel. This time it was Chip Roy saying out loud what all of us are thinking and what highly placed members of Congress and the president's cabinet should be saying. Chip Roy.
First, let me just state facts and make some certain things clear. First, I think all of us who love America and want to restore freedom want President Trump to win this fall. I think all of us take no great joy in recognizing what is very clear for everybody, unfortunately, in the entire world now, is that our current president does not have his faculties and cannot, I think, carry out the powers and duties of the office. That is why the 25th Amendment exists. I believe it is incumbent upon us to recognize that and to pursue protection of our own country with 200 days at a minimum remaining in President Biden's administration. He carries the nuclear codes. He makes decisions about our safety and security. He is the commander-in-chief. He is the one negotiating with countries. He's engaging in Ukraine and talking to, and with Russia and China and the Middle East and Iran and Israel. He's making terrible decisions about Israel right now. He is very clearly diminished. And Tony, this is the important part. Anyone with eyes saw what we saw. The president is not there. I can't take no great joy in it. So I introduced a resolution. By the way, Congress can't do anything, okay? All Congress can do is introduce a resolution and simply stating that fact. The vice president has to act. Vice President Harris would have to call the cabinet together, have a majority of cabinet join her in asserting the 25th Amendment, that the president can't carry out the powers and the duties of the office. All I did was introduce a resolution saying that that is what should occur. Some people understandably are concerned that that might interfere with what is clearly now a bolstering strength for President Trump versus a very weakened President Biden. I understand that. But let's understand this. I think President Trump would be equally or even stronger against the non-incumbent, in truth, Kamala Harris, even if she were to be put in place. And more importantly, we have a constitutional duty to make sure that we don't have a president who is undermining our national security while he has no faculties there.
Akash, if the 25th Amendment doesn't apply to what we're seeing play out right now, what does it apply to? Have we seen enough here to trigger such a drastic move?
Yeah, I mean, people are obviously right to question President Biden's capacity or lack thereof. Ultimately, what Congressman Roy was saying is that this decision has to be made within the administration, cabinet officials, the vice president. And so I think for us to sit here and say they should or shouldn't do that, I don't think is terribly useful. I think there are real questions at stake, and I think the American people ultimately are going to be the ones who decide the direction of this country. Now, whether it's President Biden or it's somebody else on the ballot for the Democrats this fall, I think is very much an open question at this point. But what Chip Roy alluded to is the fact that no matter who is in the Oval Office, the decisions coming out of this administration have been an abject failure across the board with foreign policy, domestic policy, economic policy. And I think the American people are ultimately going to be the arbiters of the change of direction that this country badly needs in November.
Yeah, Julie, that absolutely, this November's election has gotten even much more important since the debate last week. But can we get there with this commander-in-chief? Can we get there with this CEO?
I honestly, I'm so glad that Chip Roy is out there and being honest about this. I am really afraid. I'm not just afraid for another Biden administration and the policies that are going to come out of a lame duck president at that point. I'm really afraid for the next several months. I mean, China is watching. Our enemies are watching. Russia is watching. This is a scary time. And the idea that everybody's talking about whether he should run, everybody's sort of, and I know the legacy media has sort of woken up to the fact that he has mashed potatoes for brains. Suddenly they're like, wow, we had no idea. And they're talking about whether he should be the nominee. I'm like, wait a minute, we're bearing the lead here. This is terrifying that this man is the sitting president, which of course really, if you're paying attention, you realize he hasn't been the president for a while. I don't know if it's Obama in his third term. I don't know if it's Jill Biden. I don't know if it's Susan Rice and this sort of cabal of old Obama officials that are working to run the government. But this is a crisis, and Congress should act. I'm thrilled that Chip Roy is raising this, and honestly, I'm really shocked that not many more people are talking about it.
And Gabe, he made the point, it's just a resolution. They can't actually trigger the 25th Amendment, but there is discussion. Are Democrats starting to sort of recognize this too, either for realistic, actual national security reasons or just for pure political reasons because they're afraid they're going to lose in November?
Yeah, what I was going to say is, I mean, that Chip Roy would be calling on Biden to be impeached is completely unsurprising, right? Republicans for years now have been raising concerns over Biden's mental faculties and whatnot. But there are House Democrats who are reportedly circulating letters that would be going around. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if that comes to fruition. There's several Democrats right now, actually any lawmakers who are talking right now to the media, it's all on background because presumably they're trying to feel the temperature around to see if it's either advantageous or they're able to they're going to feel comfortable speaking, publicly about the president. So.
Yeah, let's go back to Akash because you raised the question of Vice President Harris and the members of the cabinet who would have to make a 25th Amendment move if it were to be made. Let's not forget that the first person to speak the quiet part out loud was Special Counsel Robert Hur at the beginning of the year when he found that President Biden quite possibly did mishandle in a criminal way classified documents, but said that it would be fruitless to bring him to trial because of his mental capacities and his memory. At that time, here's what Kamala Harris had to say.
I want to get to the heart of what I think you're raising, which you've said is his age. So let's talk about that. I spend a lot of time with Joe Biden, be it in the Oval Office or the Situation Room. And I can tell you, this is someone who is tireless in terms of working on behalf of the American people. To your point of knowing Joe Biden, he comes from a background and a place in his heart and soul where he cares so deeply about working people, about families. Akash,
unless one is to believe that this recent event at the debate last week was some kind of immediate episode and it's just, happened, one must think that the progressive nature of his condition was well in an advanced state when Kamala Harris made those remarks. In other words, she's been part of what can only be described as a cover-up here if we're actually moving in a 25th Amendment direction.
No, that's obviously true, right? And it's not just her and others in the administration, his spokespeople, members of Congress. Of course, the mainstream media for months and months and months was gaslighting all of us until it was put on full display for the entire country to see last week. And honestly, I think this is as much of an indictment of President Biden. It's an indictment of everyone else around him who has covered up for this when it has really grave national security implications that Chip Roy talked about. And I think that can't be lost on people, that there are real potential consequences to this. And not only, obviously, is there a question about President Biden's ability to do the job and run for president and do it for another 4 years potentially, but I think it also raises some really serious questions and need for accountability of the people around him and the people who covered this administration and the mainstream media who covered up for this for months.
I agree. This is one of the greatest cover-ups in American political history, and it's devastating in terms of the ramifications here, especially considering during this window we've had men and women in harm's way from our military under his command. Gabe, the cover-up also involves some of your colleagues in the media. Are you amused by the last week where they all recognize, oh my gosh, who knew the sky was blue?
I was actually just talking about this with someone else before this call, another reporter. I don't think that they just realized or recognized that Biden is in the state that he's in. I think it just finally, Greg Gutfeld actually had a fantastic tweet about this where he said something along the lines of the media isn't reporting about Biden's issues because they saw what's going on, or the White House saw what's going on. It's because millions of Americans turned on that debate and saw a president who was struggling significantly to string together a few words.
It's not because they suddenly saw it. It's because we obviously saw it. You can't lie and cover up something that is so blatant now. It's impossible.
Yeah, correct. And the real question we should be asking everyone on this panel, right, is why is the media only doing it now? Is it because Biden, that debate was a massive hit to him in the polls? Is it because it exposed significant weaknesses about the president? Why is every single legacy media outlet virtually calling on the president? I mean, the New York Times editorial board called on President Joe Biden to step down. Axios is publishing a lot of really good reporting, specifically Alex Thompson right now about Biden's issues and the White House. White House staffers speaking out. Were these White House staffers, did they not have these same opinions months ago? Or is it that the journalists were not asking these questions and were unwilling to challenge the administration, and now they're able to do it because everyone is in the same boat that it's politically advantageous and safe?
That is a great question, and I, as host of this program, will steal it and apply it to Julie. Why do you think, Julie? Why do you think suddenly the media is acting like, well, reporters?
Well, this is a classic case of don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. They know that, look, trust in the media, we can look at the polling, trust in the media is at an all-time historic low. Nobody trusts these guys. They know they're being lied to. And so now they're having to sort of shift. And we're seeing, as Gabe mentioned, he mentioned Axios and Alex Thompson. He went on the news this weekend and he was saying how this could be a real problem for Kamala Harris because she's a part of this sort of cabal of people who are lying to the American people. And he said she has been one of the main public validators of Biden's health. I think this is really going to be a problem for her if she does end up being the nominee. I think she's going to really face some tough questions.
I think you're right, and I'll sum it up with this. I'll answer my question. I think that the reason they're now coming out is because Joe Biden's candidacy in 2020 and his presidency has served, only one purpose, and that's to stop Donald Trump. And it's not just good enough that you keep him from winning re-election in 2020, but he also had to use his presidency to destroy Donald Trump, to convict him, to put him behind bars, and to end his political career. He failed at that, and after the debate, it looked as though he would actually serve to allow Donald Trump to win election this year. As soon as he no longer served that purpose, he has to go. And so the media, they're saluting smartly and charging up that hill. And I can only say the next few weeks is going to be pretty amazing and historic to witness. For 2 decades, conservatives have chosen to partner with Americans for Prosperity to expand freedom and opportunity. AFP's grassroots movement has been delivering real, tangible results at the local, state, and national level to improve the lives of millions by lowering taxes, removing burdensome regulations, and expanding school choice, just to name a few. With more than 4 million advocates and local offices across the country, Americans for Prosperity is the largest, most effective grassroots organization in America. Right now, AFP is taking on Bidenomics and fighting to secure the border. So see how you can join the movement to reignite the American dream. Go to americansforprosperity.org. That's americansforprosperity.org. One notable fallout after the debate last week is that President Trump didn't do what he usually does, which is get in the way of his political opponent from destroying himself, right? He would always either come out and say something or do something or tweet something or Truth Social something that will then become the story. He was pretty quiet. He was sequestered. He was like Joe Biden at Camp David, taking a nap. But we did get a glimpse of Donald Trump's opinion of the last week's events, a viral video surreptitiously recorded of him on the golf course. Take a look.
You gave me so much. How did I do with the debate the other night?
Oh, fantastic.
He kicked that old broken down pile of crap.
Yeah.
It's a bad guy. He just quit, He's quitting the race. Is that right? Yep, I got him out of the race. And that means we have Kamala. I think she's going to be better. She's so bad. She's so pathetic. It's so amazing. It's just so fucking bad. So I just can't imagine. But can you imagine that guy dealing with Putin and the president of China, who's a fierce person? He's a fierce man, a very tough guy. And they see him. They probably can't. But they just announced he's probably quitting.
Good.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Just keep knocking him out, right?
Thank you.
There's so much about that I love. And I don't know, Barron is always so stoic He's such a witness to these events around him. I always want to tap into his inner thoughts. Akash, I think it's notable that the president is a pretty good tipper for his caddies on the golf course. And if he's elected, those tips will be tax-free. But are there other things to take away from this video?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, the biggest takeaway is what you open the segment with, which is the extent to which he has just kept his mouth shut for the last 1 week. As you've noted, the worst thing that he could do is put his own foot in his mouth and say something outrageous and really turn off independent swing voters who were turned off by President Biden. Ultimately, they are going to be the ones who, in some respects, decide this election. Those are folks that he won in 2016, but then lost in 2020 across all these states. If this is an election about them being reminded of Trump's character and his comments and his tweets, well, then he's not going to be in the kind of advantageous position he's in. If it's an election about Joe Biden's fitness and the Democrats' policy record, then I think the Republicans and President Trump are in a great spot. And I think the extent to which he can kind of just ride this wave and not say too much, I think we all kind of agree with what he was saying, but I think the extent to which that can go unsaid and let the Democrats' nightmare speak for itself will serve the Republicans best.
Well, yes, yes, and yes. Although I just want to follow up with you directly, Akash, because if this is the only thing that we see from him, I think this also actually reinforces an important thing for those independent voters, because everything they are seeing from Joe Biden's people, Kamala Harris, some people in the media, is a lie. They continue, as Julie pointed out in the prior segment, tell us it's raining when something very distinctly different is happening to our leg. This clip is so genuine and real, and he's saying what everybody's thinking. I think that actually does speak to some of those independent voters that would like some sincerity now and again.
No question about it. It's a pretty straightforward, response, right? Obviously he was kind of confronted with a question and it was shooting from the hip, so to speak. And I think it, like you said, the words kind of speak for themselves. He kind of had the same reaction as average Americans with both to President Biden and to the prospect of Vice President Harris, which is frankly that neither of them are even remotely prepared to be president for the next 4 years.
Yeah, and Julie, it's notable that because a lot of the smart set, the people in this town, the conventional wisdom, think that Kamala Harris is a very formidable opponent to Donald Trump. He doesn't seem very concerned about that.
No, he's not. And honestly, my favorite part of that video, watching the reaction to that video, is some people thought, oh, this is bad. This is really bad. I was loving it. And, I think earlier this week, you might have tweeted out a picture. It might have been you of a man duct taped entirely to a wall. And the only thing that's showing is his eyes. And someone said, whoever did this to Donald Trump, deserves an award. And that is what made it so great, is because he has been silent. He has been quiet. He's sort of, he's given Biden the rope, and Biden's been hanging himself and he hasn't said a thing. And so then for the only thing you see is that reaction that really, as you said, very a reaction that all Americans can relate to or might be feeling. I think it was very effective. I don't see anything hurting him with this video.
It's very rare that I can see a man, a multimillionaire on a golf course, handing out hundreds as a tip to his caddy, and I actually find the video relatable. But Gabe, I related to that. That could have been me, except for all the money and the leisure time. Gabe?
Yeah, look, as far as that video, I truthfully viewed it as a pretty massive nothing burger. I think that it's equivalent to pretty much adjacent to things Trump's already putting on Truth Social, or often. He used some foul language, whatnot, but the real focus is on Biden. It's Trump could, maybe 5 or more of those videos with a little more vulgar language could be an issue for Trump. But the real focus continuously in the days is just going to be Biden. And the Stephanopoulos interview, how's that going to go? That's going to be a huge question.
Yeah, I'll say. In fact, Gabe, I'll follow up with you on that because everyone's pointing to the Stephanopoulos video as this could be a make or break moment. It's noteworthy, isn't it, that this is going to be edited and produced. We're going to see of Joe Biden what George Stephanopoulos and ABC News wants us to see. Do you think that they could be compelled, considering the gravity of this moment? Will they be compelled to release the unedited video? Do you think they ever would?
Well, I think they have a huge ethical obligation to do so. This charade cannot go on. I think it's gone on for a very long time, that the White House and legacy media outlets, CBS, 60 Minutes, they have continuously either shielded Biden from the public or put out selectively edited clips that conservative media, places where I work, like the Washington Examiner, the Daily Caller, we try to raise concerns over these things. And, we've long been sort of lambasted for having the gravitas to, even remotely question some of these clips being put out, or how, and the White House, the cheap fake stuff. The New York Times, the same editorial board that is called on the president to resign, they were publishing stories, the New York Times was, claiming that conservative media outlets, or the RNC, specifically Jake Schneider at the RNC, was putting out like cheap fakes or like phony content.
Doctored out of context videos that the New York Times actually then referenced as evidence as to why Joe Biden should no longer serve. Akash, final word on this. Of course, the parlor game in D.C. is who will be on the ticket if it's not Joe Biden. From your perspective, does it really make a difference? They're all going to have pretty much the same destructive policies for our economy, for regulations, and for basic freedoms.
That's exactly right. I think there's two important things to take away. One, yes, is Kamala Harris an absolutely horrendous politician? She is. But I wouldn't be so sure she's going to be an even easier out than Joe Biden would be, right? You will see Democrats rally around her. You'll see the media rally around her and do a million stories about how she's this iconic, like glass-shattering candidate and all this stuff. And so you will see this rally around her effect. But ultimately, to your point, Larry, she or Biden or whoever is on the ballot is defending the same horrendous policy record that has prices up 20% since the Democrats took over in January of 2021. That is indefensible regardless of whose name shows up on the ballot.
Yep, and coming off of the most expensive July 4th holiday in American history, it will continue always, no matter who's on the ticket, be about the economy. Stupid. I personally have nothing against MSNBC. Listen, they are who they are, and they say who they are. They're advocacy media for the political left, in this case, the Democratic Party in America. That's fine. I'm the opposite. But I tell you who I am, and my colleagues tell you who we are. That's fine. It's the other media that I don't like, where they pretend like they don't have a dog in the fight. They pretend like they're unbiased. That said, the gems that we're getting right now from MSNBC as they try to figure out how to navigate their way through the destruction, disintegration, self-immolation of the Biden presidency, well, it's incredibly entertaining. And no one is more entertaining over there than Joy Reid. Not just what she says on the air, but these social media posts that she's been putting out. Take a look at the latest one. There's something not very well about Joy Reid.
Y'all just tell me who the nominee is going to be. Let me know when you guys are finished fighting amongst yourselves who I got to vote for in November to keep Hitler out the White House. That's all I want to know. Who I got to vote for to keep Hitler out the White House. Y'all do your thing. Play in traffic all you want in front of these Republicans, acting a fool in front of these people instead of privately declaring your stuff. But don't text me no more, because I'm not taking no more of these texts. Just let me know when you guys are finished figuring it out, Democrats, because I know y'all the freak out people. Go ahead and freak out. Have your conversation, and then let me know who I got to vote for to keep Hitler out the White House. That's it. I'm done. Oh, and by the way, if it's Biden in a coma, I'm going to vote for Biden in a coma. I don't even really particularly like the guy. A lot of his policies, don't like him. He's not Donald Trump, right? Yeah. Hitler, White House. We keeping him out.
Okay, Julie. I mean, there's a lot to go with there. Hitler in the White House. I don't care if Biden's in a coma. I'm still going to vote for him. What to make of this?
Yeah, first of all, that was like a jump scare. Literally, I got spooked when we went to that clip because she is so crazy looking. She does not look well. I do have to say, can I just take a moment and be a girl and be kind of a mean girl here? I love that after that viral video of that guy calling her Trump for having blonde hair, because she switched her hair to blonde hair and it looked like President Trump. I love that she shaved her head because it clearly bugged her because she was kind of sporting a Trump look. Joy Reid is so crazy, but it's actually good that Joy Reid's out there because we need to be reminded of how radical the left has become. She actually does represent a segment of the Democrat Party and of the extreme left. They exist. They think this way, or rather they don't think this way. They will do whatever they can. They're obsessed with Trump. I always feel like that she's also a good reminder of the never Trump crowd, because there are people who consider themselves Republicans or consider themselves conservatives or neocons, whatever you want to say, that have these same feelings. Whatever it takes, we will take the man in the vegetative state. We will take Kamala Harris, who doesn't have two brain cells to rub together. So she again serves as a good reminder of what we're up against.
But Akash, to be fair, if the roles were reversed here and the Democrats nominated a candidate that I found so dangerous and so odious and so antithetical to what America stands for, which is what they think of Donald Trump, I'd be okay voting for somebody in a coma too. I mean, this is sort of where we are politically in America.
Yeah, I mean, she's obviously very, very hyperbolic and is just kind of a crazy person, the way she goes about things and how she says things. But a lot of the country, frankly, falls into camps exactly like you're describing, right? Which is that they're just like reflexive partisans, not necessarily because they love their party, but because they despise and fear the other party. That is what it is. It's highly unfortunate. There's far, far too much power and authority and, frankly, fear vested in the executive branch. It's a much larger conversation about our constitutional form of government. And it's ironic that every time the Supreme Court steps in to reduce the power of the executive, like they did striking down Chevron deference, for example, last week, you hear people criticize the Supreme Court for that. That decision made Donald Trump and his administration less powerful, so they should be applauding it. But the fact of the matter is ultimately this election will be decided by a very small number of swing voters, independents, moderates. And again, to the extent this election is about Joe Biden's track record, his policy record, and prices being 20% higher than they were when President Biden took office, people are not going to care about things that President Trump said or tweeted 5 years ago, when that's kind of what they're dealing with today.
Akash, I'm so glad you brought Chevron up because I missed having a conversation with you last week about it when the decision came down. And it's rare that I get somebody as smart as you from AFP to talk about it. That is sort of the biggest story, actually, of the entire Supreme Court session, even setting aside the immunity charge. What it means is, you're right, it weakens the power of the presidency and the executive branch and the administrative state. But the legislative branch has to step into that void. Do you think Congress is able and equipped to actually do the job they were designed to do? Because they've been very happy to stay hands off and let the administrative state take over.
They may not, and that's because the muscle memory has disappeared, right? And that's why it's so important for conservative organizations and think tanks and grassroots like AFP and reporters like Gabe and the work that Julie does at IWF. It's so important for the movement to step up and inform members of Congress, inform voters, inform their staff, because their responsibility now falls into their shoulders. And I think it's an enormous step in the right direction, that the people who should be making laws are lawmakers, not faceless, unaccountable bureaucrats or the executive branch. That's not how our Constitution was decided. And hopefully it makes people like Joy Reid less terrified of the prospect of somebody that she doesn't like becoming president at the end of the day.
I don't know. It sounds pretty anti-expertise to me, Akash. Gabe, I'd like to ask you, not as a journalist, but as a member of your generation, do you and your colleagues or your cohorts of your generation sort of look at a presidential election from the perspective of, I don't care who the nominee is, I'm voting for this party with these policies, like we just saw from Joy Reid? Or is it really quite a bit about the person, him or herself?
So my thought about Joy Reid's comments is actually that they're reflective of just elite DC conservative or liberal on the other side. So Joy Reid is, I think, just speaking exactly about what Democrats in Washington believe, which is that democracy is, democracy is on the line, and if Donald Trump gets in, democracy ends and the republic ends. I don't think most Americans subscribe to that pretty ridiculous ideology. And I think, maybe in the same sense, I don't think to the same degree, but I think that Republicans in D.C. perhaps view it as, and maybe rightly so, but that another Biden administration would be, go a step further than being a political issue and be a really significant constitutional issue. Obviously, we still have our branches of government. Biden's issued with, all of his executive orders. Maybe that's starting to deteriorate. I mean, the DEI across every single federal agency is quite a step beyond that. But yeah, I think I don't know if it's a generational thing so much as an elite versus normal people thing. And if you look at the polls, that's reflective of it. Since the debate and Biden's abysmal performance, Trump has surged maybe 4 points or 5 points. In Washington, D.C., if they did that same poll, I don't know. I think that Democrats maybe would say they're raising concerns about Biden, but I think that when push comes to shove, they're not going to vote for the guy they view as like the QAnon J6 insurrectionist.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think they go to RFK. I think you're right about that. And that's a really good observation. Because I think it's that debate lost in the shuffle is not just that Joe Biden had just a Titanic meets the Hindenburg kind of night, but also Donald Trump had a very good night. He was actually very strong. He was very articulate. He was very disciplined, and he actually advanced ideas. I'll answer my own question this way, though, if I could, at the end of our segment, which is this. Ever since 2008, I think that you do see, yes, about 40% on either side of the political equation consistently voting for their party and their party's policies, regardless of the nominee. It's that 20%, the 20% that voted for Barack Obama and then voted for Donald Trump. That's the 20% that wins and loses an election. And each time, whether it was Obama or Trump, they were voting for a change agent. They were voting for somebody who was going to go in and shake things up. At least that's what they told us. And that's probably what this election is going to be about too. But you know what? I'd love for you to answer our question. Go ahead and do so in the comments section. Do you vote for the party? Do you vote for the policy? Or do you vote for the person and his personality? Let us know. Love to see it. A lot of people are wondering whether Joe Biden is going to be able to make it on the ticket to November, or for that matter, even continue to finish his first term as president. Who's going to make the decision? Will it be Barack Obama? Will it be the Clintons? Will it be Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries? Will it be Jill Biden and Hunter Biden? Maybe Commander the dog will have a say in it. Well, if you're really paying attention, ultimately, the most powerful people who would have an influence on this decision, none of those people. It's the donors, the big donors, the mega donors, the people who either have the money or raise the money to keep the party and all the political action committees going. Ari Emanuel is a major mogul out of Hollywood. He's the brother of Rahm Emanuel. He's one of those big donors. And earlier this week, he spoke at the Aspen Ideas Festival, and he is not very happy about what's going on with Joe Biden right now. Take a look.
He's telling us malarkey. His people are telling us malarkey. But we're in a very bad problem. He is not the candidate anymore. I mean, if you all remember, this is a legal issue now. He was going to get kicked off the ballot in Ohio. They elected him the candidate. So you no longer can remove him. In 3 swing states, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, there's only one Democratic Congress, Michigan. They have to vote to remove him. I don't believe the Republican Party in Pennsylvania and in Wisconsin are going to do that. Okay, and if they do, it's then Kamala Harris. We don't have. This is legal. So lawyers have to look at this. And everybody says, well, get rid of them and brokered convention. No, I promised myself I wasn't going to swear. So we're in this is a pickle. You know, the lifeblood to, and I have a brother who's a politician. He's an ambassador, as it said. The lifeblood to a campaign in politics, the lifeblood is money. And maybe the only way this gets, with smart lawyers looking at it, is if the money starts drying up. And I'm assuming all of you've gotten a lot of calls. I've gotten a lot of calls. We've all sat there. I talked to a bunch of big donors, and they're moving all their money. I mean, I cannot believe we're in this situation.
Man, that's just devastating for the Biden campaign and for Democrats in general. Akash, that anyone who pays attention to American politics knows that man saying that in that setting, that's going to get things moving. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of that kind of thing, right? Whether it's donors or it's members of Congress who were first doing it off the record or on background behind the scenes. Now they're coming out publicly. The media, as Gabe mentioned, obviously after months and months and months of gaslighting us, all of a sudden every single outlet is calling on Joe Biden to step down. He had that conversation with governors the other day. And I believe the governor of Hawaii, who's a Democrat, obviously, is a doctor. And he was very concerned by what he heard from President Biden. So they are in a real pickle. But here's the thing, Larry, the reason they're in a pickle isn't just because of Joe Biden's situation and how the convention rules and the party rules work. The reason they're in a pickle is because the president and their nominee can't do the job. the immediate successor can't do the job and is super unpopular. And we go back to the prior point, which is that no matter whose name is on the ballot, the policy track record is an awful one, and it's super difficult to defend. And so ultimately, they're going to be swimming, upstream. They're climbing uphill regardless. And this whole situation just makes it all the more difficult for them to do so, on top of having a policy record that has raised prices 20% for the average American family.
What do you make of the legal question here? Because I haven't researched this. I've got emails out to election law experts like Hans von Spakovsky and Christian Adams to sort of verify, but I think he knows what he's talking about with regard to Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, that it will take an act of those state legislatures to actually modify the ballot. That, as he put it, that is a pickle for the Democrats. They don't have much of a choice here, do they, Akash?
So that's the first that I've heard of that. I know that there's that issue with Ohio, but the party was going to try to resolve that by doing their formal nomination sooner than whatever that deadline was for the state of Ohio. I do know one of the constraints, should he step aside, is with the dollars, which is that if Harris steps up and becomes a nominee, those dollars can stay because she's already on the ticket. But should they desire to remove her from the ticket, that creates an enormous problem, not just logistically, but also financially as far as where the money flows. And so I think, as mentioned, they have a number of problems that they're potentially confronting here, and that's just one of them.
Yeah, I think one of the reports from Axios this week said that some of the big donors are asking if they can get a refund. And Julie, they can't. But what do listen, this is big money we're talking about here that Ari Emanuel represents in Hollywood. And you could see the anger and frustration with him. This is reaching a boiling point.
I couldn't help but think that, or remember rather, that the Emanuel brothers are absolutely creatures of the Clintons. And I couldn't help but feel like this a little bit reeked of bring back Hillary. And in some ways that solves the fundraising issue, because she has a machine and the Clinton family has a machine. It is not a problem for them to raise money. So if they lose that money that is allocated to the Biden candidacy and will go to Kamala, I think that the Clintons can make that up. So anytime I hear the Emanuel speak on any of this stuff, I think Hillary's behind it.
That is mind-blowing insight, Julie. You're right. They are Clintonistas to the core. So yeah, so that's the play. All right, Joe and Kamala, you can keep all the millions you've raised, divide it amongst yourselves, go retire. Hillary comes in at the convention. Gabe, please stop me before I come up with another conspiracy theory.
I kind of want to respond to the comments from that, just about the donor and like whether Biden will continue in the election. I don't think donors are going to decide whether Joe Biden stays in this race. It's going to be Joe Biden. It's going to be Jill Biden. It's going to be Anthony Bernal, Jill's senior advisor. It's going to be Biden's closest confidants. Donors can pull out. That could be really detrimental to their cash flow. But keep in mind, after that horrendous debate for Joe Biden, he had his best fundraising haul of the entire campaign. There's a huge grassroots base for Joe Biden still. Maybe that'll dry up. I'm not sure. But I think what is going to decide this is going to be, whether someone who worked their entire life to become president is going to be willing to step aside, and whether his wife is going to allow him to do that after, sort of accompanying him for this entire mission. I mean, remember after the debate, this was the greatest moment. Jill Biden was like, Joe, you answered all the questions. You did that. So Jill is, I think it's going to be a Biden decision. I don't think donors are going to decide.
Yeah, you did. You answered all the questions. Now let's go to the Waffle House. Despite your debilitating cold, we'll go ahead and infect everyone having a late night breakfast. Akash, the money that we're talking about here, yes, big donors from Hollywood, big tech, maybe Wall Street as well. But the unions represent quite a bit of not just money, but power, influence, and organization. Is it notable that this weekend, trying to clean things up, Joe Biden's heading to Philadelphia to talk specifically to unions?
He's going right back to his base. Gabe mentioned this, right? That there are millions and millions of people who are diehard Democratic voters. They're going to knock doors. They're going to make phone calls no matter who is on the ticket. None more so than big labor. And so what do you do when things get hard? You go right back to the people you can depend on. For Joe Biden, that's union bosses and the people who follow them. And so that shouldn't come as a surprise. What it should do, frankly, Larry, is reinforce for the Republicans, which is that organized labor is not our friend. I think they made a huge mistake inviting the president of the Teamsters Union to the RNC. The Teamsters fund millions of dollars worth of left-wing causes. They endorse Democrats. They are never going to be Republicans' friends, unless Republicans completely renege on like decades and decades and decades of policy commitments. I think we've painted this picture very, very clearly, and the Democrats and the unions are dug in with each other. And so Republicans have got to keep chugging ahead against Bidenomics, against the Biden agenda, back to free markets, tax cuts, and deregulation, which is what worked for President Trump, and let Biden and the Democrats flounder like they have been.
Yeah, I will say this, though. Didn't the president of the Teamsters Union challenge Senator Mullen from Oklahoma to some sort of cage match? I mean, if they do that at the RNC, that might be worth watching.
Yeah, I'd have my money on Senator Mullen. Let's be clear.
I think you're right. Me too. All right, we'll leave it there. Although any of the organizers from Milwaukee who might be watching, you got 2 weeks to arrange this. You bring in the Octagon. Dude, do it on a pay-per-view. You're going to raise more money for the presidential campaign that you'll know what to do with. It's free advice. You're welcome. Joe Biden has a sight set on Pennsylvania. If he loses Pennsylvania, he loses the presidency. I'm assuming that he's actually on the ticket in November. So he called into a radio station in Philadelphia. Part of this interview is also to let the voters know that he's perfectly fine. He had one bad night, but his brain, of course, is functioning perfectly. So take a look at this part of the interview.
By the way, I'm proud to be, as I said, the first vice president, first black woman to serve with a black president. I'm proud of the first black woman in the Supreme Court. There's just so much that we can do because together there's nothing. Look, this is the United States of America. I remember as a Catholic kid growing up in an area where Catholics didn't get elected. I'm the first president to get elected statewide in the state of Delaware when I was a kid. Well, I looked at John Kennedy and said, well, he got elected. Why can't I get elected?
As usual, Julie, we kind of think we know what he's trying to say, but he just can't say it, and that's part of the problem. Let's begin with him proclaiming that he was the first black woman to serve with the black president. Far be it for us, Julie, to question how he wants to identify, right?
Right. And what is a woman? Thus far, my favorite sort of Biden moment, or elder moment of the last couple of weeks has been how he really wants to take on the in-law rape crisis going on, or the sister rape crisis going on in our country. But this might beat that, because I think this is one of these moments where you can kind of tell what he was trying to say. He's proud. I think he was saying, I was proud to serve with the first black president, and I was proud to appoint or choose the first woman and the first black. I will tell you, all that intersectionality
and I think he was trying to say I was the first Catholic to win statewide in Delaware, not the first person to win statewide.
I will tell you, all this intersectionality talk, it gets confusing. So I have a little sympathy. Like, can you imagine having to keep everything straight? Like, oh, wait, have I forgotten something? Are you disabled?
It did reek of him going on, oh, this is a Philadelphia station, urban station. Hello, black people. Let me tell you all the black things I've done for black people.
Yes, and I am black after all. So he really went for it.
Gabe, also disconcerting about this is it's a radio interview, which means he can be reading his notes. He could actually have everything right in front of him, and he still messed it up.
Right. I don't know. Yeah, I just, generally speaking, right, Biden perpetually, he's extremely confusing when he talks. It's unclear what exactly he's saying. There was a New Yorker piece by Olivia Nuzzi from, I think it went out yesterday or today. It wasn't breaking necessarily new ground, but what it did say is it included segments just about how there's White House reporters and the White House reporter pools. They are constantly kind of grappling with trying to decipher what Biden is saying. It included some anecdotes just about how this is something she had been hearing since January. Good question is, why is then something that was reported in January or the several months after that? It's July now, but yeah, so I don't know. I just think that's, again, it's just reflective of what we're seeing and why the Democrats are in complete chaos right now.
Akash, let's take a look at Joe Biden again on this sort of repair tour to try to demonstrate that everything's fine. Don't worry. He's trying to instill confidence. Here he was at the White House for the July 4th celebrations, and he went off script. He went off podium. He went rogue, and this is what happened.
You got me, man. I'm not going anywhere. All right. All right, I'll come back out when they open the gate, okay? Thank you, thank you, thank you. One last thing. You know, I used to think when I was a senator, there were always congestion on the highways. There's no congestion anymore. None. We go on the highway, there's no congestion. And so the way they get me to stop talking, they'll say, we just shut down all the roads, Mr. President. You're going to lose all the votes if you don't get in. But anyway, I'll be back out. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you. Thank you.
And we give thanks to our Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States, the extraordinary President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Ho, ho, ho.
Akash, I'll let you take whatever you like, but my favorite is at the end there. You know, that stage is on the ellipse. It's where they usually do the Christmas tree lighting, and Joe Biden said, ho, ho, ho. Maybe he was confused. I mean, it was a pretty hot day in D.C. yesterday.
I mean, at this point, it's genuinely sad what they're doing. He's 81 years old. He has no business being pushed around on a presidential campaign or being made to make decisions like the president has to make. The only reason he's in this position is because, as you mentioned, enough Democrat voters and power brokers and donors, et cetera, think he was the person to stop Donald Trump. And that was true in 2020. It likely isn't true anymore. There's no reason to keep him up here, force him to do this, let him retire into his old age like anyone else his age should be doing. And frankly, I think the country just deserves better options than what they have before them. And certainly it's extremely painful for Americans to see clips like this of their commander-in-chief. And as we talked about at the top of this show, it puts all of us at risk when our enemies abroad see them as well.
One other question for you, Akash, though, because you work in the realm of policy as well as messaging, and Democrats' major message for this election, they've got two issues to run. They can't run on their record. So Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they've had two issues, abortion and the threat to democracy. So the party who's telling us that they're trying to save democracy by keeping Donald Trump from the White House, a man who just overwhelmingly won the Republican primary, they're now contemplating going into a closed chamber and a small handful of them deciding who their nominee is going to be, despite the fact that Joe Biden, like it or not, just overwhelmingly won the votes of the people. How do they sell the idea that they're saving democracy by going through such an undemocratic process?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about it, right? It's an impossible task to do. Joe Biden was very popular with Democratic voters. That's why he won the Democratic primary, and no one seriously challenged him. The other challenge they have is that their coalition is just a bunch of disparate groups that they've mashed together through a compilation of different giveaways, whether it's to, student loan giveaways to millennials, or it's giveaways to unions or trial lawyers or the environmental causes. I mean, you saw Joe Biden struggle with an attempt to make all of their various special interest groups happy in one 30-second radio clip. It's impossible to do that, not only with your policy agenda, but also in selecting a replacement candidate. And so you're seeing a number of problems facing the Democrats all unfolding all at the same time in Joe Biden's 30-second fumbling radio clip.
Julie, setting aside the obvious signs of advanced dementia, there's another thing that bothers me here. Have you ever seen a first family so in love with the trappings of power? Why is he bragging about blocking traffic for his motorcade and the fact that he doesn't have to worry about traffic anymore? This is something that Americans hate.
That's a central feature of the Biden family, and particularly Jill Biden. And the theory is that Jill Biden is really the one, along with Hunter Biden to some degree.
But you're saying Jill, First Lady Dr. Jill, right? Because it sometimes sounds like Joe. Yeah.
Right. Sorry. Jill Biden, the wife, the doctor, I'll just call her Dr. Biden, is really controlling things behind the scenes. And the reason is because she loves that access. She loves, as you say, the trappings, the motorcade, the power. Vogue did a piece on her recently, another cover shot for her and an article. And the start of the article, the reporter was clearly also in love with the trappings and the way she described being in this motorcade and the power of it. And, how Jill Biden enters the building without a care in the world. I think there is some truth to that. I think that she really does enjoy this lifestyle, this power. And I think that is what's keeping Biden in place, why it appears that Jill Biden and the family want him to stay in place because, again, they love the power.
Yeah, let's end it with you, Gabe. I'm just curious, as listen, we piled on quite a bit here today because this is the dominant story and there's so much material to work with. Do conservatives in the media and also Republican politicians, do they run the risk of piling on too much that they actually turn Joe Biden into a sympathetic figure? Or are the stakes just so high that there's no time for sympathy? Yes, he's old. Yes, he's got problems. You can feel sorry for him, but you can't have him anywhere near the levers of power.
I don't think that the spotlight is on conservative media one way or the other. I think that, for the past several years, as we've discussed on this show, conservative media has reported on issues with the Biden administration, Joe Biden independently, individually. That reporting has often been ignored. Now it is very validated, and it is into the mainstream, and left of center outlets are journalists are raising concerns and reporting on concerns in the White House and whatnot. So as far as, I don't think the spotlight is on conservative media to prove or not prove anything. I think it's on the Biden administration and Joe Biden and how he's going to handle, how his allies are going to handle. They're not going to be able to shield him from the public any longer. We got the Stephanopoulos interview again. So I think the spotlight's on Joe Biden.
What I'm hearing from you, Gabe, is kind of a green light. I'm seeing permission. I'm hearing you say, pounce away, and pounce we shall. In fact, tune in here every single day for all the pouncing that you need, want, and desire. That's it for this time, though. In the meantime, I'm Larry O'Connor, and you can call me Larry.